Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start. I would just like to say there is a little exercise in this as well. Okay, but I've embedded it into it, and I'll give you the answer at the end. There are actually 4 errors in this talk, deliberate errors. There are probably a lot more as well, but there are ones I want you to spot. So I will be asking you to, as we won't have much time at the end, to actually spot these errors as we go. Okay. So the title of my talk is an equation, Einstein's other equation. You may not have heard, it's not as popular as the E equals mc squared, but that's the title of the talk. And you can figure it out as we go. I'm talking about a kind of different approach, which this is a interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, whatever that means. Interestingly, I don't think anybody really knows what it means. It's just a very useful provocation to think about the way disciplines are formed. And in this particular case, we're in a university where the whole kind of core of it is based on different disciplines fighting each other. Okay, and of course your PhDs are fundamentally inter-transdisciplinary, and that we're trying to break down some of those. And so when you step back from that and look at the different methodologies that operate in terms of information gathering in those disciplines, you have a particular problem because it starts with the nature of existence, okay, which is ontology. Okay, what is this thing that's out there? If you come from a kind of scientific background, you think, well, there's a bunch of, it's there, there's a bunch of facts, and we're going to find them using the kind of tools we saw earlier. If you believe that maybe this thing out there is some kind of consensual hallucination that we've agreed upon, then you need another set of tools, and that's where epistemologies come in. So your epistemology that you use, which is about how do you find out from that existence information, then you will use a particular kind of epistemology, which is the nature of knowledge, finding out about things. So for the sciences, you probably use an experimental approach to find out what those facts actually are. If you're more of the kind that thinks, well, it's a kind of negotiation, then you might want to ask people about stuff. Okay. So those are kind of broken down into the kind of disciplinary structure that we have in this university, which is sciences, the STEM stuff, and humanities. Humanities deal with that kind of slightly weird stuff that you can't quite pin down, and the sciences are all about naming things down. That's a very loose and hang me for that. I know. At the bottom of this, though, is a particular problem because most of the humanities deal with a kind of black box, right? When you are talking about that fuzziness about what that thing is out there or outside of this particular box, you get into this black box kind of mentality, and the humanities have all really fundamentally been about me not telling you how I got the kind of answers that you particularly like. Probably because I don't actually know myself, because I make stuff and I don't really want to think about how I make it as some kind of muse that talks to me at night when I'm slightly drunk, or maybe, it's not just drugs, it's other kinds of hallucinogenic drugs. I don't know what to say. Laudanum was quite popular with certain writers throughout history. So this black box thing, this where the miracle occurs in research, is fundamentally related to us understanding what it is that we do as researchers. In the sciences, there's generally a bunch of rules about how you do that. More recently, the humanities have got fundamentally much more aware of what those rules might be, but when I'm talking here about the arts and humanities, certainly in the practicing arts, that black box has been poorly articulated in the past. And it is only now with the advent of kind of the academicization of making stuff that we start to understand what those mechanisms might be. But even then, this idea of, well, there are certain facts that we're all trying to find out about. This is wonderful experience I've had working with the Immersive Vision Theatre, which I'm sure we'll have a look at some point, is that dome over there, which was funded by Kettle funding for the earth sciences, and anything to do with experiential learning. We've kind of inherited and are doing different stuff with it, but in working with the earth sciences, I found these amazing two groups. You know, you think, oh, there's the sciences and there's the arts and humanities. They live in different buildings and they've got different methodologies and they dress differently, things like that. And probably have different diets as well, and different Facebook kind of groups and stuff. But you know, they're the sciences. They deal with data. That's fine. But in fact, when you look at the nature of those sciences, there are huge battles going on within them about the nature of stuff like data. And this is wonderfully over here. You have these kind of humanists who talk to people. You know, they go and look in sheds and find out when the first cuckoo was spotted. They read diaries. They look back through literature and try and come up with kind of models of climate change, which nobody kept records. They were just literary reviews and stuff. And there are those that use instruments, the instrumentalists who put sensors out on Dartmoor and things like that in the sea, who actually get numbers back. Those numbers are calibrated and everybody agrees that the definition of that particular number is the same everywhere in the world. And these instrumentalists call the humanists' data dirty data. I was really shocked by this, that there's something dirty about this stuff. And basically the reason is that this data comes from humans and not from these calibrated instruments. Now, that's wonderful and I think highly problematic for us all. Especially, you know, with some projects we've been doing. This Dr. Fish is a great name for somebody who's dealing with rural policy research. But make this statement: as much as the rational technocracies of policy and decision-making might otherwise imply, environmental processes need to be felt as much as they're understood. So, in feeling stuff, you're obviously, you know, there's a kind of history of science which is, you're objective, not subjective. So, where does that leave us? Well, in terms of this transdisciplinarity, the bits I'm going to be talking about now are kind of those slightly more fuzzy things, and they're slightly more processes which are around, for instance, archival research. This is stuff that humans have made, probably, which then you start poking around and start finding stuff. And this is an example of Mike Phillips giving a talk on I think Southern Cinema, or is it photography or something? This is a wonderful book by a guy called Billy Kluver. Billy Kluver is an engineer who worked at AT&T, interestingly for me because one of my heroes, in that he used to work with a group of artists in the States in the kind of 70s called Experiments in Art and Technology. So he's a pretty cool pre-digital arts kind of guy. However, he was also interested in photography and was collecting photographs. And there's this wonderful book which tells of a day with Picasso. Basically what he did was he just found photographs and then eventually realized that they all came from the same reel of film, which is, you know, wow, look, there's all these photographs in all these different archives and they come from the same reel of film. And actually, he's discovered that they were taken on exactly the same day. And they were all around a visit Picasso made to Montmartre in, 1905? No, something like that, 5 or 6, or 1916. So what he did was to try and work out, okay, they're all taken on the same day, how do we actually go about making sure that they're the right size? And as an engineer, when were they taken on the day? He went around to measuring the angles of the shadows and stuff like that, and came up with this fantastic narrative by reconstructing this one day through this photographic archive. That's a really simple kind of understanding of, you know, defining certainty from these remnants of this moment in time. And we're kind of always struggling to deduce meaning from this stuff. You know, that's left around. This is Blow Up, Mel Brooks' Blow Up, famous film. I don't know if any of you have seen this film.
Not by Mel Brooks, no?
Sorry?
It's not by Mel Brooks.
Oh, have we spotted the second? Have we spotted the second error? You missed the first one. It's not by Mel Brooks. You must be thinking of High Anxiety, which is by Mel Brooks, which has a fantastic essay of this scene from, I don't know if you've ever seen the Mel Brooks High Anxiety film. It's a wonderful film. It's all about kind of Hitchcockian tropes. And basically this is David Hemmings, who looks just like David Bailey, remarkable, who is a fashion photographer who takes some images of a girl in a park, some kind of argument going on, two lovers. And then slowly, by looking at these photographs, starts to realise that there's something quite odd in this narrative. And so, as the title of the film suggests, he blows the picture up. He basically does one big zoom into this photograph. And I will try and fast forward this because it goes on for ages. It is a wonderful piece of cinema because it is all about, it all references the process of making, which is so glorious about it, but also this process of inquiry through just by looking at the material that you're dealing with. And of course, as he goes through this process of blowing this up, they still do black and white photographs over there, basically making each one of these photographs larger and larger and larger, and trying to figure out a trajectory until he spots this blurry thing, which is a gun, and then continues this process. And even with the evidence of his eyes, it's only after he's made these things really, really big that he discovers the body. So, again, another film which plays with the same process of the material of the real world is Enemy of the State, 1974, Francis Ford Coppola. Has anyone seen this film? Yes, Enemy of the State, Will Smith, quite famous for being in it.
It's a reprise of a conversation.
He spotted the others! This is actually The Conversation, not Enemy of the State. Gosh, it's so hot this morning. Right. So this is not Enemy of the State, it is The Conversation by Francis Ford Coppola, of which Enemy of the State stuck Gene Hackman in just for a bit of kind of historical credibility, whatever. But this is a wonderful, actually this title sequence is better at revealing this process. He's a guy who records people, a bit like Blow Up, in the same notion of taking photographs and seeing them. This is about listening to stuff. So they've recorded 5 separate recordings by trying to bug somebody in a park. So there's a guy at the top there with a rifle mic and stuff like this. And eventually, after piecing these sounds together, these 5 separate recordings, or 4 separate recordings, on this tape, you can see it. Wonderful technology as well. You get to a point.
I haven't decided what I'm going to get.
You get to a point where he hears them say something. I won't tell you what it is because it will ruin the film.
Once somebody's baby boy, and he had a mother and a father.
And he knows the answer.
And now there he is, half dead on
You
the
think.
bench.
You've got to see the film really for this to make any sense. But in knowing the answer, he realises something terrible is going to happen and then sets about trying to fix it. Only to discover he's got it completely wrong. Okay? Just by a slight change of emphasis in the language that's used, rather than any particular fact involved. Now this kind of is really what happens with all of these media artifacts, stuff that people make, is that they change their context. Every fact you thought was real, in a different context, changes dramatically. So every time you go to a museum, you'll have an interpretation panel, and that's been interpreted by a curator or a researcher, and it'll have been identified through whatever processes that we've looked at this morning. You'll find that they'll then stick them inside a case, and beside them in that case will be another object which has also been researched and somebody's come up with the facts about it. And then suddenly you put the two things together, and the meaning that's produced by those two things just being in the same case dramatically changes those interpretation patterns. And there has been a massive shift in interpretation in museology on that realization that you can't impose a meaning on these things. They have their own meanings, and when they enter into a dialogue with other objects, you get more complex readings. This is an example of that kind of process. This is the Knight's Tale from the Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer's story. It's been a problem for a lot of literature reviewers for a long time because it's not very good, really. It's the first story in the Canterbury Tales. Every other story is this amazing, ironic, pornographic romp around the different tellers' kind of psyche and stuff, as well as the audience who are listening to this. But The Knight's Tale is just a bit boring. And it was only in the kind of early 90s that this chap, Terry Jones from Monty Python, wrote this book. It's debated, it's argued a lot, because of course nobody knows. But in the reading of this text, everybody was getting it wrong. They were taking for granted all the battles that this knight went on were kind of heroic. It's this heroic knight. He was really clean, he was really, honourable, and he'd go to these battles and he'd come back as a hero. It was only when Jones started to unpick what actually happened at those battles that everybody realised that actually he was an idiot. This hero was in massacres, he took part in routs, he took part in just complete military disasters. And therefore, the whole emphasis of the book shifts in the way that you then understand it, because he was a fake, not a hero. And then you have other kinds of processes. This is very topical, this was on Friday, right? On Friday, this gourd, which is supposed to contain a handkerchief, which has been dipped in the blood of Louis XVI when he was beheaded during the Revolution, which has been passed down, and historians have examined this. But it's only when bloody science came along and did a DNA analysis on the blood that they realised it wasn't Louis XVI's blood at all, it's somebody else's. Now that's really, imagine you're a historian and you've based your whole career around that gourd and that bit of blood, and then somebody comes along and says, actually, no, it's not his blood. But for historians that's wonderful, because suddenly you've got to say, well, whose blood is it? And of course, science can't then get in the way, because science can disprove that it was Louis XIV because they've got DNA heritage, they can figure out that it wasn't that, but actually nobody knows who it was. So for history that creates a wonderful kind of scenario.
Was that on Thursday? Was it another error?
Friday? No, that wasn't another error. Well, the topic, oh yeah, okay. I forget and read things. Right? However, just last January, the story was completely the opposite. Okay, this gourd did contain the blood of Louis XVI. Okay, this might be hindsight, but is this a problem here? Is this science kind of messing up? Is this historians messing up? Or is it just the media interpretations that you get through our kind of channels that we now take as reality? And just to illustrate this even further, and the tension between, this is a bit of, just for all the psychologists.
Send her in.
Great. Now we get to hear from a man of research.
Mr. Driver, Mr. Romano, you both seem more relaxed than I expected. Do you have some kind of surprise for the tobacco people?
Do my own research.
If you're planning to continue with medical testimony, you'll only be inviting further government interference. We must police ourselves.
There's your slogan.
The medical thing is dead. We understand that.
Yes, dead, an apt choice of words, considering the public is convinced that cigarettes are poisonous. If we can't insist that they're not, I believe our most recent surveys have provided a solution. I can still suggest that cigarettes are part of American life, or too good to give up, or most appealing, an assertion of independence.
So basically, if you love danger, you'll love smoking.
We could put a skull and crossbones on the label. I love it.
Before the war, when I studied with Adler in Vienna, we postulated that what Freud called the death wish is as powerful a drive as those for sexual reproduction and physical sustenance.
Freud, you say? What agency is he with?
So we're supposed to believe that people are living one way and secretly thinking the exact opposite? That's ridiculous.
Let me tell you something, Scott.
Doctor,
Dr. Gutman. Psychology might be great at cocktail parties, but it so happens that people were buying cigarettes before Freud was born. The issue here isn't why should people smoke, it's why should people smoke Lucky Strike. Suggesting that our customers have what you call a death wish, I just don't see that on a billboard.
So when Reader's Digest says they're dangerous, they also said Bambi was the book of the century. There's no proof.
There's conclusive proof that none of these non-tar or nicotine filtration systems have any effect on the incidences of lung cancer.
Just give me the damn report.
I think you'll find it very convincing.
Oh, I'm sure I will. You're the one who found all our medical testimonials in the first place.
It's true, Mr. Draper, but
Has anyone else seen this?
of course not. It's your account.
Good. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I'm sorry, I just find your whole approach perverse.
Good luck at the meeting. I'm sure it'll be a quick one.
I can't remember which series this was in. Right, okay.
Sal, I'll take that drink now.
Okay, so here they are discussing how do they say tobacco industry back in the 60s. And psychologists getting involved to prove, disprove, understand it. Of course, it's a wonderful bit of, from a historical archival approach, this is a wonderful reconstruction of great fashion and stuff, and the kind of debates that would have gone on at the time. But also, Freud's thrown in, which of course is the darling of the humanities, and no psychologists worth their salt would regard that with a. But it does suggest that actually there is a difference between the arts and humanities in terms of the mechanisms that are used. And fundamentally, one of those differences is to do with the kind of embodiment of making. And that's what this slide is about. It stops here, I'm afraid. But the making of things, right? This is really important because there is something about making which is research, and the arts, in terms of practice-based research, are finding it difficult, are struggling to make it as equitable to the kind of research processes that go on in the sciences. But in fact, it's a wonderful problem to have. The fact that there aren't many rules for this doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. And in fact, what would you rather live in, a world built by designers or a world built by sociologists? I ask you that. And of course, this process of understanding the world is problematic. If you work in a making environment, then you might come up with the wrong conclusions, as in this case.
Hold this guy. Behold the atheist's nightmare. Now, if you study a well-made banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 ridges. On the close side, 2 ridges. If you get your hand ready to grip a banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 grooves, on the close side 2 grooves. The banana and the hand are perfectly made one to the other. You'll find the maker of the banana, Almighty God, is made with a non-split surface. It has outward indicators of inward contents: green, too early; yellow, just right; black, too late. Now, if you go to the top of the banana, you'll find, as with the soda can makers, they placed a tab at the top. So God has placed a tab at the top. When you pull the tab, the contents don't squirt in your face. You'll find the wrapper, which is biodegradable, has perforations. Notice how gracefully it sits over the human hand. Notice it has a point at the top with ease of entry. It's just the right shape for the human mouth. It's chewy, easy to digest. And it's even curved toward the face to make the whole process so much easier. Seriously, Kurt, the whole of creation testifies to the genius of God's creative hand.
Okay, now I don't know if you're going to try this. Now, in terms of human ingenuity, we get it wrong all the time. If, however, you are a monkey, you do it from the other end, which is, have you ever done this? It is wondrous. How do we get it wrong? All you have to do is use a tiny amount of pressure at the end, the other end of the banana, and it opens like it's magic. And that's the way monkeys do it. Humans obviously have got the wrong kind of goal approach. For designers, on the other hand, I'm a designer, I make stuff. I have to make, this is actually the real thing. This is a container, I don't know what you're thinking it is. It's a container for a banana, okay?
Of course it is.
Yes. Now this is the problem when you're a designer, is that you have to enter into the design process, which are a little bit similar to sociological processes or psychological processes. You have to ask people questions. And as my friend Harry Callahan, aka Dirty Harry, aka Clint Eastwood said in The Death Pool, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. And this, of course, is fundamental to innovation. Here you have Henry Ford from around 1932. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. Okay? For something this complicated, it's really hard to design products by focus groups. A lot of times, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. Okay? So, this inversion of this, what do people do to then have an input, is
What about
problematic.
Steve Jobs?
Oh God, he's on it! It's true. There's a double take here because there is no evidence that Henry Ford actually said that, but Steve Jobs did say this. Okay. And just to demonstrate this problem of design, these are the doors over there. Okay, I don't know if you've been. They're wonderful automatic doors, and they just don't deal with. Yeah, I've got to wrap up now. And they don't deal with human behaviour very effectively. So what if, you go through a door, you expect to push it. They're automated. You push it, they stop. So they've now retrofitted instructions for stupid humans. I know that this is Waitrose's. This is please do not turn off this tap. It runs for 45 seconds from its last use and will turn off automatically. Attempts to turn off this tap will cause it to run for a further 45 seconds. This is a design feature and not a fault. There's a whole bunch of stuff here to do with a kind of ethnographic process which is leaked into design, which is about a consultative way of dealing with design. Dun and Bravey are wonderfully doing this. They're called cultural probes. And they're very much about making techniques. You give people a camera, you get them to adopt an object, they live with it, and then they annotate it and they feed back, and that goes back into the design process. This embodiment of that is fundamental. There are some projects going on here with dancers. Wayne McGregor's involved, and Scott Dale Hunter, yes. Laban or Laban, I can't remember which one it is, there's one way of pronouncing it. Defined a kind of notation system which has become, in a digital context, much more kind of embodied now. It's not just about a dancer experiencing the space. I mean, how do you communicate dance to somebody else? Right? You have to dance it. There is no, this abstraction of it. The embodiment of it is fundamental. And the digital process, this is a project that Scott Dale Hunter was involved in, the CogNovo project worked on in Ohio State, which is an annotation process where dancers actually get to draw and annotate their own performative processes in this. Really interesting mix. I've kind of run out of time, really. But I just wanted to, I'll whiz through because just to give you the last, there's also some great stuff here. I'm not going to show it to you now. So much time. Maybe this one, our own instruments are kind of problematic in terms of you build these things, you put them out there to see the world, to understand this thing, this ontology. And then something happens. This is probably a large Klingon spaceship and cloaking just off Mercury. You see that? Okay. Then this came out a couple of years ago. It is actually, there is something really big just off Mercury, and it was discovered by this radio telescope that was imaging a large solar flare. This is real scientific data. Of course it's not. This is a kind of weird product of the imaging process, the analytical process that was defined.
So they say.
So they say. Yeah. I ask you, which is more interesting? Who's going to get the $1 billion kind of Hollywood film? The scientist or the... So, just to reveal, these are the glitches there. Of course, that's William Shakespeare, not... that's where the algorithm comes from, actually. I can't do maths, so I just stole it. Blow-up, conversation, and the Henry Ford thing. So, this, he's one of my students. Oh, questions? Yeah.
You didn't also make a spelling mistake.
Sorry?
You also didn't
Look,